I was at school. I had like six years old waiting for my mom to pick me up. I had flasher like come in front of me, like flash me like right in front of the school.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Live from the Willie Nelson and Friends Museum Showcase in Nashville, Tennessee. It's Music is Funny. Musicians talking to comedians about music and comedy. With your hosts, Raelyn Nelson and Jonathan Bright.
Smoking, I'm so high, I keep toking, I'm drunk, but I'm still drinking too.
Welcome back to Music is Funny. I'm Raelyn Nelson.
And I'm Jonathan Bright from the Raelyn Nelson Band, back with another ridiculous and unnecessary intro.
Hey, you guys, go check us out. We're playing in places this year, RaelynNelsonBand.com. And without further ado, Anna Manis. I want to get into everything about you, but we have to start off the way we always start off. So what is the first music you remember loving as a kid?
Okay, so the first album I bought was Bark at the Moon. It was 1985. Nice. I was given $5 to go into a store, and I was supposed to get a doll, and I saw Ozzy Osbourne on the cover, and I was just like, I'm going to do that. And I came out, and my parents were like, you sure that's what you want? I was like, yeah.
Did you know, were you familiar with the music, or was the album cover that just got you?
Well, I had my aunt who kind of babysat me all the time, so she kind of always played Led Zeppelin and old classic rock music. And
got
all
a hip aunt.
Yeah, so she was our babysitter, and my mom was an artist and always out at night working. And
what kind of artist?
Well, she did fashion design, and she also did oil painting. Okay. So she was working for Fifth Avenue Fashion, where it was like all creating things for like the stars on Broadway and that kind of stuff. So she was doing
really cool.
Yeah, so she was doing all that, but it was a lot of nighttime stuff. And so my aunt lived upstairs from us, and she would babysit us, and she'd braid my hair and let me braid her hair, and we'd just like listen to records. And I think that's probably like where it started.
Did you grow up in the city?
So I grew up in New York City. I was born in New York City, raised in Astoria.
Okay.
My dad had a restaurant in New York City, so we were always, over the bridge. When I was a young teen, I moved to Greece because my dad had some business there. So I lived in Athens.
Oh, wow.
And I went to the school, the American school there. So I was with all the Army kids, all the embassy kids.
What age?
9. I moved there 9 to 18.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But I was always back and forth. So it was like whenever I had a chance, I was back home.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was American Embassy School there, and it was kind of crazy because my parents had some work on island there. They were building a hotel. So I was in Athens a lot. They were on the island a lot. So I had a lot of time to kind of, do my own thing.
Still listen to Ozzy while you're in Greece?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, when I first moved there was 2 channels on the television station, and they were both government owned. So there was no music, no entertainment. It was literally just politicians yelling at each other 24/7, completely like torturous,
wow.
And
especially for a 9-year-old.
Yeah, coming out of like New York too, like Broadway shows all the time and everything. So this was like a huge culture shock. So I was nose deep in my vinyls and my cassette tapes and my VHS, and like totally old, but that's all I did. My uncle would send me like movies and stuff that he would film like on HBO and television and like send me things. So I had like something American to like, to feel like my thing. But when I was 14, I ended up singing. I was invited to sing at the Hilton, and somebody heard me and came up to my mom and was like, would love for her to audition for this thing. Why don't you come over? And it was an opera conservatory.
Oh, wow.
I didn't know anything about it.
Serious singing.
Yeah. But I was singing Karuna Burana. So I think that was kind of where it kind of started for me with music. And I show up to this audition. I take the train into Athens. I'm like flannel shirt, white zombie t-shirt on, Doc Martens, walk into this place, and everybody is like 18 to 25. They're all like perfect little specimens with their scarves around their necks and their little things writing down so they don't speak, and trying to conserve their voices. And here I was like screaming out like, licks the night before.
Right.
So I was like, oh shit. Like I was a little nervous and intimidated, but I was like, fuck it, I'm just do it. So I did it, and I ended up getting the audition. They let me in. I was like the youngest at the conservatory, 14. So I had to like work with them after school so I can actually do the conservatory. So that was kind of like my first like music thing that
14.
I started at 14.
That's so young.
Yeah. And then I did that for a while. But, you know, even though I sang opera, it was like rock and all that kind of stuff was more
Your thing.
my thing. So when it came to the States, back to the States, I went back to school, I did college and all that kind of stuff. Went to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts and learned how to lose my New York accent. As you can see, I don't have it anymore. But it can come back anytime you want.
I can hear it just a little bit. It's like slightly there.
It comes out after a couple of drinks, or when I'm angry, you're going to hear it. Like there's no way I can do it. But I've trained very many years to like try to get rid of it. But yeah, it's kind of funny. I was like the only New Yorker in my class. And here we are in the middle of New York City, all right, with like 30 other students, all from like all around the country. And they're all sitting there making fun of my accent because we had to like word these words. I'm like, what a fedora. Why? You know, like, pause. And they're like, really? Pause? That's how you say it? I'm like, listen, don't come to my freaking state and tell me how to fucking talk, all right? Like, I'll get my fucking uncle on your ass.
I love it. I can hear you talk like that. You can just talk like that for the rest of the podcast.
Okay, I'll totally do that. Anyways.
And we'll talk like this. And, you know,
we'll get our Southern accent on, which also comes out after a few drinks.
Yeah.
It's funny, you can't hold that shit in after alcohol.
Absolutely
Dumbs you down.
Absolutely. Makes you normal. That's what I say. It brings me to normalcy, I should say.
So in New York, did you like grow up in an apartment with?
I grew up in a town, like a house in Astoria.
Okay. I don't even know what that looks like. So is it like townhouses?
They're kind of like houses that are all attached on a block. So we all had like a back alley.
Like what you picture on TV, people who live in New York, it looks like that.
You know, like Sesame Street or whatever.
Yeah. It's like the Cosbys,
yeah, the Cosby. Yeah, exactly. Like they're all kind of attached. And then we all had our own little backyard, but behind the backyard there was like a little garage, and then behind that there was an alleyway, and that alleyway was like connected to all of our garages. So we used to hang out back there because less cars, can get a little bit more trouble, like, you know, like kind of thing. We used to throw fireworks back there.
And you walk out your front door and you just start walking on the sidewalk in this busy street.
Yeah. So like, well, I was kind of lucky because we were off of like one street over from the crazy street or whatever you want to call it. I mean, it's still busy. But
busy, yeah.
But yeah, like you would walk out and there's like things going on and you'd hear music and people and, you know.
It's never quiet.
Never quiet. I mean, people say "fuck you" for a good morning. Like, you know, you're like, "Hey, good morning." They're like, "Fuck you." You're like, "Fuck you too." Like, it's totally like that. Like, but yeah, I mean, it got to the point where like I was at school. I had like six years old, waiting for my mom to pick me up. I had a flasher like come in front of me and like flash me like right in front of the school.
Oh wow! Congratulations!
I was like, oh, that's my first penis. There we go. Like 6 years old.
Wow.
What do you do? Were you in shock or
laughed my ass off.
Yeah.
I mean, I was 6 years old. Like I didn't know any better. And the dude got pissed and he ran away. Like he had a little belt with a little machete on it. It was like really weird. Yeah.
Yeah, I got flashed in the parking lot in Nashville probably like, I don't know, it's probably been 15 years ago, but I think the guy thought I was a chick because he saw me from behind. I turned around and he was in a bathrobe and he freaked out, you know, covered up
What
and
did
then
you
jumped in
do?
the car. I just started laughing too because penises are funny.
They're so funny.
Yeah,
They always
it's
are.
funny.
I mean, even through college days when people just flash them out, it's just like a funny thing. Like if you're going to do that to me, expect something to come out of my mouth and it's not going to be down there. Like it's just, you know, it's too funny.
It's like our buddy Keller had at a bar. He was had his penis hanging out at something. This was at a.
He does this thing that he calls.
Yeah, but this was different. This was his penis hanging out, and he was going around the bar. This is a long time ago, so he could still get away with it.
Throw it up.
But it went in his pants really quick. Some girl looked down and goes, "Hey guys, look! It's like a penis, only smaller," which I thought was one of the funniest lines I've ever heard. But yeah,
Was it? And then afterwards, he came up with the cherry tomato.
no, this was post cherry tomato.
He takes his ball and makes it the size of a cherry, like squeezes it and makes it the size. It doesn't look anything like a cherry tomato.
It kind of does.
No, it does not. It's not the same color as a cherry tomato.
Ew.
It's like ball sack color.
And like
The first time I saw that, he presented it on like a saucer.
plate.
Yeah, he turned
Yeah.
around and it.
so like the buffalo meatballs. were
Yes,
they-
exactly. Yeah, there's pictures of him in front of like the Washington Monument.
It looks like an
profiled.
uncooked meatball more than a cherry tomato. That's what he should call it, the uncooked,
The uncooked meatball. We'll let him know after this. Yeah.
Anyway.
So anyway, enough about balls and penises.
Hannah.
Yes, there we go.
So, okay, what is the first like, how did you get into comedy? What's the first comedian you remember loving and thinking, oh, I could do
So
something
my
like that?
first, when I lived in Greece, I'd have tapes sent to me all the time. My
Right.
uncle would send me tapes. He would send me Eddie Murphy and Andrew Dice Clay and all these different
wow.
comedians. Like there were specials on HBO, and like I was just like completely enthralled. And I loved Andrew Dice Clay because he always did. Like he's from New York,
Yep.
and he had the accent, and he loved rock and roll, and he was like, oh my God, it's Dice, you know. So he was like a really big thing for me. But when I got out of the academy, I got involved in a sketch comedy improv troupe with a bunch of comedians, and that was probably like my first working gig that I got. And it was 10 comedians. Amy Schumer was one of them. We worked we did rehearsals originally right above the Comedy Cellar, and then at night we would just go down and like hang out with like whoever was doing their shows. And everybody at that time, like, it's unfortunate it's not like that as much anymore, but down at that time, it was like you could just hang with people, and
Right.
other comedians didn't care like how far. Like I was just getting my feet wet, but they were so like giving and like helpful and wanted to chill and you know, shoot the shit and wallow in all of our misery together. And you know, it was
Right.
kind of like this really cool way for me to like learn from so many like cool people that really knew what they were doing and trying like, I mean, Jim Gaffigan was already doing really well, and he was starting like some kind of tour that he was doing overseas for, I forgot what it was, some army thing, and he was working on. And he was like trying to work on jokes with that, and we were like backstage just trying to like figure out like, you know, something that would be funny for him. Like, it was like
Right,
just
sure.
stupid, like he's gonna use our shit, but
Right.
like, you know, like, oh, let's think of something. You know, like, but it was just like a really cool time. I mean, we'd walk outside, like Dave Attell's like sitting on the corner, you know, and it was just like a cool like experience. And then we would perform at Dylan's on Broadway on Friday nights. And then I had my friends at, you know, Mark Riccadonna, he had Stand Up New York. He was managing up there, and I would go meet up with him sometimes afterwards, and we would like hang out with his crew up there. And it was kind of like, you know, we all had our little pockets of comedians, that our little spaces that we were at. It was more on the Lower East Side most of the time because my theater was down there.
Right.
I was running a theater company right out of the academy. So
Were you still singing at this time too?
Yeah, I was singing, but I was getting so involved with the comedy, and it kind of took a back seat for a few years. But for me, like my comedy and music kind of always intertwined. That's why I end up writing a lot of parodies and doing a lot of musical, funny stuff. So that kind of always kind of blends in all the time.
And you write music.
I do.
Now, what kind of music do you write? Do you write opera music?
No, I don't. I mean, I've sang like opera rock, but I've never written opera rock or anything like that. I do love to sing it. It's a lot of fun. But it's more like singer-songwriter kind of stuff. A lot of the stuff ends up being funny. I just end up like thinking like, oh, this is such a good song. And then like a few months come down and I'm like, it's shit. It needs to be funny. And then I change it. So like,
Or maybe it's the same with you, where when you're writing a song, you always just write something funny, even though you're not going to maybe use it. The funny stuff is what comes out first.
Yeah,
right?
it's hard to
Exactly.
get that out of your head when you're trying to change the words.
exactly. And you're like, but this should be serious. This should be meaningful. Like, stop talking about hot dogs. Like, you know.
So when you were hanging at the Comedy Cellar, was that kind of like around the tough crowd era when all those guys were running around?
Yeah.
Man, there were some killers
Yes,
around at that time.
there
It must have been
were.
amazing just to watch those guys
It was
on the come up.
It was such a cool experience because it was
Like you hit it during a boom.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Stepped into
and
it during a
it's
boom.
funny too because all of them at that time were saying, "Oh, stand-up comedy is coming down now." Like because like the '80s was like such a huge thing,
Right.
so like they were kind of jaded, but we didn't feel that way.
Right.
You know, like we
Right.
were just like, oh my gosh, this is like the most amazing thing ever. Like, you know, and everybody was so willing to just give their information. Like, you know, like now it's a little bit more tight. You know, I feel like a little bit, you go into a green room, people don't want to talk to each other, people don't make eye contact. Like it's changed a bit. And it was also difficult being a woman in stand-up at that time.
Right.
That's why when I was started, I did the comedy troupe. It kind of made me feel a little bit more like secure because I had
Got a
like
team.
my team of people that I'm going, you know, like all my friends were doing tours and, you know, I just wasn't in the right position to do that at that time, to be like, you know, in small little venues and traveling. And it just wasn't going to work out for me. So I ended up doing more of the producing side. So I was like stayed home base in New York, but helped produce like talent and upcoming talent, bringing them into what I had learned and try to give them something and creating events for them and all that kind of stuff.
Had you already started doing stand-up at that time?
I had started doing stand-up.
What made you decide to do the stand-up? Like get away from the team and step out? I mean, probably everybody wants to try it, but like, what was it that gave you this, to spur you on to go, you know, give it a shot?
I think, honestly, it came out organically during the sketch comedy because I would go out and talk to the audience in between stuff.
Yeah,
kind
the
of
hype
like,
man.
Yeah, to kind of get people going and kind of like talk about stuff. And I had this like character where I was like, I'm Anna, I'm the Greek from Queens, and this is New York talk, and let's go. And, you know, we all had this thing, and let me tell you, and oh my God, and here we go. And so that was kind of like this thing. And then it kind of became this character, and I was like, oh, wow, like I can kind of run with this. So I kind of had that character where I would just like rip on audience and rip on the situations that were going on in the news and that kind of thing. And then I kind of got involved. I got an audition for this play. It was a part of a festival in the city, and I got the lead, and all of a sudden at one of the nights, this little man comes up to me after the show, and he says to me, he's like, hey, doll, you know who I am, you know, you did a great job, yeah, you know who I am, you know, it's a really good thing you don't know who I am, but I'm going to tell you, and I'm like, all right, who are you, you know, he's like, I'm Joe Franklin from the Joe Franklin Show. I'm the first interviewer ever of all time. I've interviewed over 300,000 people, you know, I'm the most amazing person in the entire world, you gotta, you know, he's like, and I'm watching you, and I know talent, and I gotta talk to you, and I gotta, you know, we gotta get together, and I have some friends over here at Saudi's want to come and meet me. And I'm like, all right, you know, I was like, all right. First, when he first started talking to me, I didn't know like if he really was who he was and like exactly who he was, you know. And then I realized like, oh my gosh, this man has interviewed literally every single person that you have ever met. I mean, from Barbara Streisand to Elvis Presley to Cary Grant to Marilyn Monroe. I mean, he wrote a book with Marilyn Monroe. And he's basically was like the key to Broadway and theater and film and television from the 50s on.
Wow.
He's basically an icon in that
little world. Yeah.
World of his. And I kind of just fell in it. And
because he saw you.
He saw me performing at this show that I was doing, and he came backstage and wanted to meet with me and talk to me. And so we met at Sardi's, which is like this restaurant in Times Square. It's a lot of like Broadway people would go and get business done there and everything. So he met me there and started introducing me to some people in the business, and we had this awesome conversation, and he wanted to help me out. He's like, all right, listen, I'm going to have you go over here, and I'm going to have you do this thing. You're going to go over on Tuesday, you're going to go on 22nd Street and blah, 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 and this time, just go there. And I like show up, and it's like Tony Bennett's recording studio, and I have like this like huge like studio at my feet, and like they're just like teaching me how everything works and like showing me all these people. And he like basically mentored me like for a long time, kind of teaching me who to know, who not to know, what to do in the business, who to speak to in the business, when you should not do things, you know. So he kind of like gave me my working chops, because I had like the
So it wasn't talking about comedy or your act or anything. It's just everything else that goes along with
yes,
comedy.
because that stuff for me was coming naturally, but I had no idea about like
Yeah, and who would?
business
Because
sense.
same way with the music biz, it's just ridiculous anyway. It doesn't make any sense.
It
so.
doesn't make any sense. And so he was kind of like, all right, you need to talk to this person, you need to know this person, you need to meet this person. So he kind of basically like laid it out for me in a way that like made me feel a little bit more comfortable with, all right, I kind of got this stuff going on. Okay, now I know what I'm doing. So I started producing comedy shows. I started doing events, started helping out other talent, and started doing my own stuff.
Did you manage to slide yourself in any of these ones you're
Every
producing? There you go.
single
There you go.
I mean, come on.
Yeah, of course.
But it was really always just such a crazy experience. I mean, this guy's house, well, his apartment was his office on 43rd and 8th Avenue. It was the worst case of hoarders that you would ever, but yet the coolest that you would ever have seen. Like, there was a winding road to his desk at the back of the office, and everything else is just piles of memorabilia from every single person he's ever interviewed.
Wow.
So like Jerry Garcia's guitar is like holding a door ajar. Like Elvis Presley's Gibson is like on the floor collecting dust. Like Marilyn Monroe's dress is in a drawer. Like I'm like, I don't want to know what's going on. Like, there's like awards.
There's no displays like
no
this.
beautiful displays like this. This is amazing. It was literally like the worst case of hoarders. Like the fire department would come in all the time because they knew it was a fire hazard, and they would come in and check every once in a while. I mean,
Just to make sure they
just
could
to
get
make
through.
sure. Yeah, I ended up with a date actually from one of the firemen.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I was like, all right, now I gotta make sure that I'm always there when the fire finishes. But yeah, so that was basically how I started working in comedy, because he gave me I would say the basis of like the business, whereas beforehand, everything that I was doing was great. I loved it. And I was having a great time and everything like that, but I was getting a little bit lost. It's hard.
Just kind of running around in circles unless you know what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it really made a difference.
Is
in the
he
fact
still
that-
around?
No, he passed. He, I think it was in
Who ended up with all
2000.
this shit?
They sold it, auctioned it.
probably.
A lot
That's
of
what I
it
was
got
thinking.
auctioned. Yeah, because he wouldn't get rid of anything. The fire department was like, this is a fire hazard. We have to get rid of all this stuff. And he was like, nope, not until the
Don't
day
you know
I
who
die.
I am?
Yeah, that's exactly what he said. Don't you know who I am? I've interviewed 300,000 people. Like, I'm the best. Like,
I like this guy already.
so he wouldn't let that shit go like until like the very end. But what I always find when somebody dies, right? Like, how come everybody always asks, like, this is like as a society, right? Like, oh, so-and-so passed. Oh, what happened? Like, why is it that like as a human society, we do that, right?
Because
like,
we want to know how they died.
we want to judge them, right? We want to judge
Yeah.
why the fucker died. Like if it was like, oh, he died, he was sick. You're like, oh, okay, you know, he was sick. You know, if it's like, oh, she was a crackhead who ran across 8 lanes in a highway high as a fuck, like playing Frogger.
I knew she would end up like
Yeah,
that.
fuck that bitch, right?
Exactly. It's true.
I won't die like that. So
Right. It's like,
win. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Or like, oh, it's with a sad heart. You like start scrolling. Hey, what happened? What happened? It's like, what is wrong with us as people?
Yeah. We want to know. We want to know because we have to like think about every scenario of death. I think that's what we're afraid of.
I think so
Right?
too. It's like, is that going to happen to me? Or
I'm
how
more
that
afraid
can
of the
happen?
pain associated with death than what's going to happen. Like, who cares what
after.
happens after?
Well, hopefully you'll get hit by a truck or something and you won't even see it
Feel
coming.
the pain?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or the fall. If I, for some reason, like
Yeah, oh
the
my God.
yeah, like I don't know. There's for reason for me is like in a plane, like falling, like that to me is like
You got
'cause it's
about
like,
15 seconds to
right,
think
you
about it.
have
Like,
too
wow,
much
I'm really going
time.
down here.
Yeah.
This is happening.
Like, just knock me over the head, shoot me something.
Yeah.
But like going down, like that to me, I find is like probably the
I always
scariest.
thought about that too, like with Elvis. He died sitting on the toilet. Like, wouldn't you think if you felt yourself going down, like with the last energy you had left in your body, you would just fling yourself off the toilet
tub.
somehow
To the
and pull
tub.
your pants up? at least, instead
Yeah.
of just suffer the indignity of the king dying on his
But
throne.
what if he was just really funny and he didn't really die, and he was like, just tell him I died on the toilet, because when you go to Graceland, you can't go upstairs.
That's true.
What if he's just
Conspiracy.
up there?
Or what if he was just really funny and knew he was going to die and was like, this is going to crack the boys up. And he's just sitting there half naked on the toilet. That could be
Or
too.
he was really, really constipated and had a heart attack.
That could be the one last push. and
One last push.
So when you were doing comedy and like you hook up with this guy, well, not hook up with this guy, you know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Did you fuck him? No, I'm just kidding.
That's what killed him, actually. Yeah. But did you ever like look around and go, what the fuck am I doing? Like this hotshot's talking to me and I'm still like,
Yes.
what have I got myself into?
Yes, all the time. It was a surreal experience every single moment. And it was always like so nonchalant the way he would call me, because he'd be like, hey, doll, I have an address for you. And he wouldn't tell me who I'm meeting, what I'm doing, what's going on. So like all of a sudden I'll be like in a studio, or I'll be like on a Broadway stage, or I'd be like in a comedy venue with so it was just always like this weird, trippy experience, but it was always so. It was the best education that anybody
bet.
could possibly have, because I went to school for all this crap, believe
Right.
it or freaking not. And like I learned nothing compared to like what I learned just like on the streets, working the venues, doing this stuff. And I couldn't ask for a better education in that form.
Right. Was he booking you other places than just comedy stuff? Like you mentioned being on Broadway stage. Were you going around doing all kinds of different stuff other than just comedy?
He was throwing me scripts. I was out doing stuff over in LA. He had me like reading scripts for like sitcoms. And,
Wow.
I had an opportunity to do something I passed on. Just didn't work for me. And I just had a tie with New York. I think it was really hard for me to get out of that.
I imagine.
But so it was constant. It was always like I met. Woody Harrelson was doing a show. I think it was his first Broadway show that he ever had done, and he was kind of nervous about it, and there was all this stuff going on. And again, I get a little date and an appointment, and I'm like, "Oh, show up here," and I show up, and it's like the theater where he's doing. I got to go back and like learn everything about like how they did the stage and the lighting and all the cool stuff, and met everybody behind the scenes, and it was just a really cool experience.
Yeah.
But it just. You can't like learn that or pay for that shit.
Right.
Like that just kind of like, I was really, really lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have any plans? Like, were you just taking all these things where you're like, I really want to do stand up, or I really want to do, like, did you have sort of a path at that
I
point?
really wanted to do comedy. I mean, comedy always came naturally for me. So that was always like comedy and music. It was always just organic. So that was always my thing. He had a plan he wanted to do for me. So he was trying to gear me for Broadway and gear me for all that stuff, and which I would have loved as well.
Right.
But I always kind of was like, yeah, but I'm going to go with my improv group over here.
Right.
I ended up at UCB, Upright Citizens Brigade, which is Amy Poehler's
Yeah.
comedy place. Yeah, I mean, so many amazing people out of there, like Matt Walsh and Matt Besser and Aubrey Plaza and my fellow Greek, Jason Mantzoukas. Yeah, I mean, that was like a great little spot to like just learn and expand and create and improv, long form, short form, all the yes I do's and yes ma'ams and all that kind of stuff. I ended up, because I love doing improv so much, I ended up doing improv stand-up, which was you basically go up without a set at all, and the audience or somebody from the audience or somebody from your team will give you a word or two, and then you have to run your set.
Oh, wow.
So somebody would be like, like Abraham Lincoln and tequila shots, and like you just have to like run in front of an audience and like run that.
Yeah.
So you either like completely bomb or like it's like freaking amazing.
Probably funny either way, though.
But it's funny either way.
And also
exactly.
fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. We had Craig Gass on there one time, and he is like so good with doing impersonations
Oh,
and
yeah.
like so many different.
He does the
like,
guys in Kiss amazingly.
Yes, and like
hysterically.
Robert De Niro.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh, he was so funny. So we had a lot of fun like doing those, and it was always so funny too, because like when you get comedians to come and do like something that they're not used to doing, like a lot of them don't want to do it. Like they're like, oh, I don't know, I like my set. I'm gonna do my set. Like they don't want to.
Right, and it's a different talent than just being able to write jokes too.
Yeah, it is. But afterwards, like the ones that end up doing it, they always are like, man, I want to do that again. Like that was fucking awesome. Because there's no like judgment. Like, you haven't worked on this stuff for a long time.
Everybody knows there's a possibility you're going to bomb.
Yeah, and you probably are, but it is still funny. So.
Now, since improv and that kind of thing is your wheelhouse, do you write jokes for your comedy, or you're like, this is kind of the stuff I want to talk about, so I'm just going to go wing it?
I do. I don't have I'm not like Seinfeld. Like Seinfeld, he comes to he writes everything and literally will change like one like is to at or whatever, and has to do the whole thing again in front of people. Like he's very particular with every single word that comes out of his mouth. It's like thought of, rehearsed, like prepared. I get way too nervous. Like I can't do that. I could barely listen to myself
lines,
on tape.
basically.
Yeah. Like I'd rather have like, all right, I want this bullet point, this bullet point, this bullet point. Oh, I might mention this, and kind of like just go from there. After a while, if you start doing jokes a lot, you kind of end up just kind of saying them. You kind of just know them at some point. So you kind of just know what you're going to say. But then there's all times like somebody will say something in the audience, or you'll see something new, or something pops in your head and you can add to it. Mm-hmm. So I prefer to be that way, because I find like the things that come organically are 10 times funnier than the things that I sat down trying to write and think that were funny.
Yeah.
Like, after a couple of beers or like, a couple of jacks, it's like, oh yeah, this shit's funny. It's like, yeah.
I would think an improv background helps in crowd work too, just period.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you're used to winging it.
Yeah, you have to. Like, you just have to kind of be able to be in the moment. And for me, my head's always in the clouds. So like to force myself to be in the moment is a real organic experience. It's like a real experience that makes me feel like, all right, my head's on somewhat straight today.
Yeah.
What was the first time you did stand up like the very first time by yourself?
Oh God.
Do you remember it? Was it a blur?
I don't remember what I did. Like, I don't remember my set.
Right.
I do remember I had written stuff, and I do remember preparing. And
how long did you know you were going to do this? How long of preparation was it?
Probably 4 weeks or so.
Okay,
3,
so you
4
had some
weeks.
time to freak out about it.
Freak out, yeah. And like, I remember writing some jokes and like passing it by like a more like established comedian friend, and I was like, oh, read these and tell me what you think. And they gave me some notes, and I was like, oh shit, now like what, they changed it, so maybe that wasn't funny, so that got in my head, and it was like, oh,
I'm not funny anymore.
Yeah, I was like, oh, stop. But and he was like, actually everything that he gave me was so helpful, but like I was just started getting in my head. But yeah, I remember I got laughs and I got applause, and everybody was like, oh, you did a great job. But I felt like I was totally horrible. Like I felt like it was terrible. But I feel like there's this great comedian. She came up to me and was like, listen, if you don't bomb 1,000 times, you can't call yourself a comedian. Mm. She's like, you have to like know what that feels like so you can actually be funnier. And I thought that was like it was like, that's like such a nice way to say you suck.
Yeah. Hey, you got one out of the way already. So there you go. 999 more to go.
There you go. Exactly.
Yeah,
Let's put the bottles on the wall.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
That's like when people say, you look like you're having fun up there. You just know that they're like, they did not like it.
Right,
and that's the nicest thing.
You guys look like you have fun doing it.
You look like you're having a lot of fun.
You look nice time.
Nice strings on your guitar. Doing well.
You didn't break a string.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Congrats.
Yeah.
You should pat yourself on the back. That's wonderful.
Now, did your mom and dad, are they surprised that you became a comedy musician?
I know that they didn't want me to be that.
Really?
Yeah. My dad wanted me to be a doctor or something. He wanted me like...
So they weren't exactly down with the music or the comedy.
Yeah, no,
as
not
first
at all.
choice.
Not at all. Like, but I mean, from 2 years old, I was like popping out of corners, like trying to tell people jokes. Like that was just my like. There was no way that I was not going to entertain. Like, it's like So they kind of knew.
Right.
And my grandmother was. in Greece. She was an entertainer in Greece, so she did movies
got
and
it in
stuff
your
like
genes
that.
then.
So it kind of like runs in the family, I guess you would say.
Well, and your mom too. She's in
And we
kind
have
of show
art.
business.
Yeah, she's the artist. She's
Right.
like very shy. Don't ask her to sing. Like, don't ask her to go in front of a mic. She's terrified. Like, she can't. She's like really, really shy. So like
Weird.
I'm like the opposite of her.
Yeah.
So she's like everything that she prayed for when she was little. Like she's like, oh well, you got it. So I was like, oh well, thanks, mom.
That's great.
Yeah, I was like, did you really want to pray for this? Like, are you sure?
I'm so tired, Mom.
Why did you do this to me?
Do you have siblings?
I do. I have a brother.
Okay. What does he do?
He is a jiu-jitsu instructor.
Okay.
Double black belt, crazy karate dude.
Yeah, a lot of comedians are into fighting. I know he's not a comedian, but
Yeah.
it's-
I did it too for many years.
Yeah?
I did, boxing, martial arts, kickboxing, but jiu-jitsu, MMA.
Yeah.
But my favorite was boxing. Like that's my strong suit. But he has his own school in Florida, and his daughter does wrestling. So she's
what got you into jiu-jitsu? Just for protection, like to protect yourself?
Yeah,
in New
yeah.
York City.
She saw a penis when she was 6. I mean, you got to take jujitsu. Come on,
exactly. When you get a penis and machete shown at you at 6 years old, you gotta get your boxing gloves on. But yeah, like living in New York City, it's no joke. So especially as a girl, and I was always very, very tall, very developed very young. So like I always looked a lot older than I was. So at 12, 13, 14 years old, people were treating me like I was 18, 19, 20, 21.
Yeah.
And so like it came to the point, especially since I was doing things like going to venues at 14, 15 and like hanging out with,
Right.
So I just felt like I needed to protect myself. But I also thought it was fucking badass to know how to kick somebody's ass.
It is.
See, in the South, they just teach us how to shoot guns. That's what
Well, that's a good thing
It's valuable, too.
too.
You just got to have one.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good thing too.
So when you start doing, we've talked to a lot of comedians, and when they're coming up, that usually there'll be a comedian or 2 or 3 that'll take them out and sort of take them under their wing. Do you have anybody like that like once you started would take you out to to different clubs and let you spread your wings?
Mark Riccadonna
Oh, yeah?
was definitely
Mark's
my,
great.
He is great.
Shout out, Mark.
Yeah, I love him to pieces. He's a huge, he's been a huge help for me in the comedy world. Like when I was doing all my stuff downtown, he was managing Stand Up New York. So he would have like some amazing comedians up there, and he would be like, come on up, like, you got to come meet these people. And we would just like all go and hang out in the green room and hang out. And he'd put me on shows, and he'd be like, oh, why don't you come and do that? And I'm like, I don't know. He's like, just say a couple words and stuff like that. So he was definitely a big help for me.
It was probably helpful on the business side too, because when we were talking to him, he was 19 when he was first booking the club or whatever. So he had a crash course in how all that shit works too.
He sure did. And that made it even cooler because it gave us like all this like, we were so close, and then he got that job. So it was like he had like all this information and all this stuff to like just
And opportunities too.
Yeah. And he was always such a good person where like, he wears his heart on his sleeve and is always very helpful.
Right.
So he's not going to be the type of person who's be like, I got this and you don't kind of thing. So he was always very generous.
How'd you guys meet? Did you?
We went to the Academy of Dramatic Arts together. So our school was not that many students, so we ended up being a very tight group.
So you guys were fairly young when you met.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, we were young. Too young, but it was such a cool time though. That time period with comedy in the comedy clubs. You just can't get that anymore in this lifetime. Like it's so sad because like you go into the clubs now and it's either people looking on their phones, people not making eye contact. There's just like that camaraderie. Like you still have your people that
right?
But it used to be like it was everybody,
right?
So it was like we're all in the same boat together, and it kind of felt for me. At least for me, it felt like everybody was very friendly and helpful. But it's something that you don't really see, as much anymore, and that's sad.
Yeah, we were talking to Brian and Lucy from Zanies, and I was asking because Brian's been doing it forever.
Yeah,
and how the difference between back in the day, young comics as opposed to now, and he made a good point. He said, I think they're a little more jaded now. They come in with a plan
Yes.
to be successful, when back in the day, you just started like, I'm going to do comedy, and you're never even thinking about anything other than just, I'm going to go get hammered and do
Yeah.
some comedy, and if I get to go out, that'll be great.
That's it, exactly. And it was just like, it was even if I don't get up on the stage, I'm still backstage with all these comedians, and we're all shooting the shit and writing jokes. And like, I wrote so many jokes just from backstage, from like hanging out with other people, other comedians that, would be like, oh my gosh, you look like, and they would say something, and then it'd be like, all right, this is a good, and then we were like, run with it, like, all right, crack, I share on crack. Like, there's like all these different things, but like the past, I would say 10 years, it started, I think it has to do with social media, I hate to say.
I'm sure.
Because everybody feels like they can have their own venue, where beforehand it was like, if you're going to do comedy, you had to be in a club. That was it. Like,
you had to meet people,
and
you had to get along.
meet them, and you had to be friends with all the other comedians, and you had to be friendly with the other comedians. They had to like you somehow,
right?
And it was a group of people who just really wanted to have the same ideas and the same lifestyle, and everybody was kind of like wallowing together. Whereas it's changed now, where everybody kind of feels like they could be on their own and they don't need you.
Right.
Yeah.
And they probably can, with social media, you
Absolutely.
can figure out a way to make it that way.
In some ways, it's a great thing, but in some ways, being like, the nostalgic comedian in me is like, I miss the clubs. I miss that, like, let's all just hang out in the
Community.
green room and like, shoot the shit. Like, that's where like I feel like the funniest things ever happen. It's not on stage. It's always backstage.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was that way when I started in bands 100 years ago.
Yeah.
That there was a bunch of rock bands in town, and nobody had any designs on anything, but it's the same thing.
Yeah.
You'd go down to the clubs. There was really only two across the street from each other, and then the Gold Rush, and you just hung out, whether you were playing or whether you weren't. That's what you did on
that
weekend
was
nights.
your life,
Yeah,
right? That was your
exactly.
that was like my end, like my battery line. Like like I had to fill it up, like go hang out and fill it back up, because throughout the week it would deplete. Right.
Exactly.
Like,
your
let's go.
miserable job or whatever. It's like weekend. Woo, let's go rock.
Exactly. And it's like, oh shit, so and so is playing. Like I gotta go listen to them. And then it's like, all right, they're not going to be on till 11, but I'm going to show up at 9 because I'll just hang out behind, backstage and with everybody else. And that's really what the beauty, I feel like, of that time period in comedy was.
And it's probably just societal from that time period. Because again, if you wanted, unless you were going to stare at your four walls, you had to get off your ass and go out and do something. I mean,
Absolutely.
I can pre-cell phones when you call your answering machine to check to see if somebody left a message, to meet them at,
That's right. Or
once
like
you're
the
out,
little pager, like with the number, like
road maps and atlases.
Yes,
But once you were
exactly.
out, you were untethered, man. There was no way to contact that, and everybody sort of had spots to go to where they knew they would run into somebody.
That's it.
And if nobody was there, you had 2 or 3. Well, I don't like these people, and you just kind of bounce around. But
yeah, and that's how New York City was too. Like we had, like my theater was downtown, so I had my troupe downtown that I did my stuff there, and the Comedy Cellar in that area, and then the other comedians were up on the Upper West Side, and then there was Comic Strip, which is on the Upper East Side.
Right.
So it was like you had your little pockets that you would go to. So it was like, all right, we're down here tonight. And then we'd be like, oh, so and so is like Seinfeld's like doing a setup, up there. So like shoot the train up, like go up there, like hang out there for a little bit, and just
And if you missed it, you missed it. Nobody's shooting video of any of that.
hell no. Yeah, that was
it's
it.
gone.
Yeah.
And if somebody was there, you had to hear and try to get there before they split.
Yeah, or somebody tries to tell you the joke and never again.
Right.
Never let another comedian tell somebody else's joke. It just never works the same.
That's a good point.
It's like, did you hear what he said? Yeah.
Did you ever get to meet Dice?
No, but that is like, that's a goal.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Did you ever get to meet any of your comedy heroes that you were?
Let's see. I've met many comedians, heroes. Let's see. I've met so many of them.
Yeah. Or musicians or anybody famous that you...
Yeah, musicians. I was like The Cure and Eric Clapton and The Cult and Violent Femmes and Susie and the Banshees and
That's
The
a lot.
Cave and Iggy Pop.
Where did you meet these people?
In Greece.
In Greece.
Yeah, so when I was in Greece, I got involved with all this music stuff, and I got involved with this guy who had a venue there, and he basically was like, all right, you want to come? You hang out.
Oh, that
Like,
must have been fucking great.
yeah.
The you mentioned 2 TV channels,
That,
but you got that?
I had to find my fun.
Well, you found it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I would just go, like, he had Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights. He would have gigs, and they were always like, it was like this small venue, but always like awesome freaking bands that would go in there. And because it was like a small night, a small venue.
It's the best way to see a band.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and he would always let me go backstage and hang out and just meet everybody and shoot the shit and like talk. I mean, I got to sing with the Scorpions at one point, like just a song. I was like in the back.
The opera background helped there.
It did.
He sings
It
high.
was- yeah, he does. It
Yeah.
was so much fun. But that was kind of like all that stuff kind of fell into my lap. Comedy. Let's see. My favorite would be Dice, I would have to say. And I'm still hoping that I get the opportunity to meet him at some point. Dice.
He was so. It's hard for if people weren't around at the time to remember how gigantic that guy was.
Huge.
Wasn't he the first to sell out Madison Square Garden?
Yes, he was.
And it was always weird to me because we all had the records and you knew his bits. And he was one of those, I guess people still kind of do it, but people went there to hear the record, like bands.
Yes.
They weren't really, yeah, give me some new jokes, whatever. But they wanted to hear the record. And that's kind of strange for comedians
Yeah.
because usually the record comes out and you're like, shit, I got to come up with some new stuff. But he
That's
could,
right.
it was bizarre.
I know.
I always think of him and Steve Martin in the same boat.
Oh,
like
yeah.
that.
Steve Martin was great. Actually, Steve Martin is another one of mine who I actually had a brief meet with, which was really cool.
What was that like?
He's just so cool. He's just like, he was just very, very like friendly and kind.
I would be starstruck if
I was a bit. I
Yeah.
was kind of like,
Yeah, I don't think he gets the props of just his career.
No, he
Is
doesn't.
crazy because he was basically doing like slapstick Jim Carrey stuff.
yes.
And then he transitions to serious actor in movie or straight man in movie. He's funny as a straight man. He's not being wild and crazy
No.
guy. So he's got like a massive amount of talent.
He does.
And a banjo player.
And I was going to say, and he plays
Yeah.
the freaking banjo.
And a
you know,
magician.
freaking
He
cool.
wanted to be a magician. I read his book.
Yeah.
He started doing magic. So
But anytime you talk to him, like he said, he's so like he doesn't think highly of himself at all. Like he's always kind of like undermines his own
yeah.
work.
Right.
You know, he's like,
probably
oh
why
yeah,
he's so likable.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's really why it is. He's like, oh yeah, like I have terrible banjo skills, like, and it's like,
Yeah.
Right,
okay.
which is funny because he always played the banjo, even as act back in the 70s. He'd
Yes.
bring it out and do joke songs and stuff.
And it was like, he's an icon. He's a true icon.
So, what brought you to Nashville? When and why did you move here?
So I moved here in 2019.
Okay.
My husband had some work here. His family is basically.
and he's not a comedian.
No, he's not a comedian at all. He works in tech. He's
Yeah.
a computer.
So he's not even funny. No, I'm just kidding.
Not really, actually.
He's the opposite.
He's exactly the opposite, but he's the yin to my yang.
There you go.
He actually grounds me, which is a good thing. But yeah, he's a techie, and his family line is from this area, from like 1700s. They've been
wow.
here forever. But his dad left really young and moved to Kansas City? No, St. Louis, and then lived in New York City. So Chris grew up in New York, upstate, and now is back and kind of feels like he's home. Like, even though he never grew up here, he feels like very connected.
feel it in the blood.
He really does.
Yeah.
It's really funny. It's like, but I could see why. It's really a beautiful place here. I really love it too. It's completely different, but it kind of does remind me a little bit of Greece, which is kind of weird.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, and it's not just because you guys have a Parthenon.
I was about to say.
the Titans.
But no, there's just like the weather and the hills and everything.
And a little bit of
and the-
space.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now you have a house with a yard, right?
Exactly.
Driveway and.
Yes, I actually
You
have.
don't hang out in the alley anymore.
I don't have an alley to do fireworks anymore, blow off my eyebrows. Nope, not anymore.
But you can do that in your front yard in Nashville.
That's right.
Okay, so when is the first time you remember hearing about my grandpa? What is your own Willie
my
Nelson, Papa Willie
gosh.
experience?
Let's see. I've always loved your grandpa. I mean, how many years has it been that I would say probably when I was 13, 14, and I was getting into all the music stuff in Greece, and I was listening to all the records and everything. That's probably when I first heard your grandpa.
See, that's weird because when I was 13, I didn't want any part of Willie Nelson or any of that. It was
Really?
like country music was
but you
old
were
people's
here
music.
too. You were here where
No, but
country
just-
was big.
Just in general, yeah. But it took me much later to actually listen to something other than On the Road Again and go, holy shit, this guy can write good songs. Because at that point, it was just, country music. I was listening to AC/DC and Kiss and all that. I didn't have time for country music. That was my grandfather's stuff.
I feel the same. I was all AC/DC and all that kind of stuff, but there was Willie Nelson, Tom Petty,
Yeah.
Pink Floyd, which was kind of in my a little bit more towards, there's like that country, like, melodic stuff in there.
Yeah.
So all of those were still up there for me. So even though it's funny because even though rock and classic rock have always been a big thing for me, I was raised with piano music and jazz and blues and all those other aspects in my life. They were always there as well. It was just like the classic rock was usually what I went to the most. You know?
And don't you think the soundtrack of New York stuff is jazz, isn't it?
There is very much of that. I actually worked in a jazz club when I was in New York for a while. And we had all the musicians that would come in through there. It was really a great experience. The Jazz Standard. I don't know if you know that place.
Yeah.
It
I
was
don't know
a great
anything
little
about New
spot.
York, really. I haven't spent much time there. And it's been in and out.
And I was going to
when
say it's much different now. It's probably a lot of stuff is not the same anymore.
we had a show there, and it snowed.
Yeah,
when we
her
were
little
coming
sister
in.
was with us, and we were coming in, and it was the first snowfall. It was in December, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. But it snowed a foot. As we were coming in, it was just a dark cloud, and we were going down, and you literally could only see 2 stories up because of the snow.
My little sister had ever been
She'd
to New
never
York
been
to see
there.
it, so she couldn't.
We go in at night, and it's snowing.
And it's snowing. It just looked like. I think she saw Chinatown.
Yeah,
Is that
but
where-
only.
But only, like-
even driving into the city,
Yeah,
you couldn't see the buildings. I was like, well, Scout, there's a big, beautiful buildings over here that you can't see. I'm white knuckling because it's just snowing like crazy. I think we did find parking pretty easy. That was good.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was nobody downtown. It was so strange.
Yeah.
It was nothing like you hear New York
Well, there were
is,
people
you
out
know?
walking, but
Barely.
nobody driving.
No driving. Yeah. That's why I always drove because you could find parking spots and like you can drive like that, and like it was easier than taking the subway sometimes at night.
Right.
So
And less sketchy.
Right, exactly. Like if I knew that I'd be at UCB and I'd get out at like 12:30, 1 o'clock. I'm like, because that going all the way downtown from where I lived, it was like you had to take different trains and like transfer and stuff, and then you're
Right.
like waiting in a train station in the middle of the night, and like sometimes like they like take longer at that time, so you're like just sitting there by yourself. So it was like, nah. So I would drive whenever I possibly could.
Yeah. What's driving in New York City like? Good God.
Slow
It's
and
like
honk.
fast and honk and my finger out the window.
Anna, thanks for doing this podcast with us.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank
thanks
you
for
guys.
coming
I
down.
had so much fun.
Yeah.
I think Mark and Richie are going to come down at some point, and I'll just invite you back, and we'll all have a
I
big
would
party.
love that. That'd be
Do
so
a
much
big
fun.
podcast. Okay.
Oh, you saw her first 5 minutes, right?
I did, and she did so awesome. She really
You don't
did a
have to
great
say
job.
that 'cause she's here.
No, I actually,
All right.
she
I'm
really
just-
did. She killed it.
That's what I've heard. I just want to double down and make sure. It makes me happy and makes me sad because I love it when she bombs. But I'm happy that she did very well.
She did. She kicked ass.
Thanks. All right. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you guys.
Cheers, you guys.
Cheers.
Anna Manis is my favorite comedian. She's actually a big comedy buddy for me. We go to all the shows in town.
Yeah, she's done a whole lot, man. Music and comedy. Right down our alley. Anyway, enjoy your groceries.
Don't be an asshole.
I know your mama's name.
I don't remember the other one.